She stood in a room full of the most dangerous men in Chicago, crime bosses, corrupt politicians, and cold-blooded killers, while her husband pointed at her like she was furniture and said, "Beg me to stay married to you, or walk out that door." Every man in that room expected her to cry, to plead, to fall apart. Instead, Vivian Hartwell set down her champagne glass, walked upstairs without a word, packed 2 suitcases, placed divorce papers on the dining table, and left. What nobody in that room knew, what even Roman DeLuca himself didn't know, was that she had been ready for that moment for 4 years. Drop a like and comment your city below so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now, let's begin. The night it happened, the temperature outside had dropped to 12 degrees, and the wind coming off Lake Michigan cut through wool coats like it had something personal to prove. Inside the DeLuca estate on the North Shore, none of that mattered. The house was warm with candlelight and expensive bourbon and the kind of laughter that only exists when powerful men feel completely safe. Roman DeLuca had thrown the party for no particular reason, which was the most dangerous kind of party he threw. No agenda, no business being conducted under the surface. Just Roman wanting an audience, which meant Roman was in one of his moods. And when Roman was in one of his moods, someone always paid for it before the night was over. Vivian knew this the way she knew the sound of the house settling at 3 in the morning. The way she knew which floorboards creaked and which cabinet hinges needed oil, and exactly how many seconds it took for the security system to reset after the front gate opened. She knew Roman's moods the way you learn the geography of a place you never chose to live, not because you loved it, but because survival demanded it. She stood near the far end of the main salon, holding a champagne flute she hadn't touched in 40 minutes, wearing a black dress that Roman had picked out for her 3 weeks earlier, and sat on the bed without asking if she liked it. She did not like it. The neckline was too low for the weather, and the hem was too short for a woman who wanted to move freely, and Roman had chosen it precisely because it showed her off in a way that reminded every man in the room that she belonged to him. Belonged. That was the word Roman used. Not loved, not married, belonged. Around her the party moved and breathed like a single organism. Carmine Fazio, Roman's oldest capo, stood near the fireplace with a glass of scotch and a story nobody wanted to hear, but everyone pretended to enjoy. Marco Vitelli, who controlled the South Side distribution network, laughed too loud at everything Roman said, which was a survival strategy Vivian had observed in men like Marco for years. Judge Harold Stein, who had dismissed 3 separate indictments against Roman's organization in the past decade, stood in the corner talking to a woman young enough to be his granddaughter. Nobody acknowledged the irony. Nobody ever did. Vivian circulated. She smiled at the right moments and laughed at the right moments and refilled her champagne glass at the right intervals so it looked like she was drinking when she wasn't. She had learned early in the marriage that a clear head in a room full of drunk, powerful men was the closest thing to invisibility a woman could achieve. Roman caught her eye from across the room and something shifted in his face. Not anger, not exactly. It was subtler than anger and more dangerous. The particular satisfaction of a man who has decided he's going to perform tonight and has just selected his prop. He raised his voice over the crowd noise. "Gentlemen, gentlemen, let me tell you something about my wife." The room quieted the way rooms quieted when Roman spoke. Not because people wanted to listen, because they understood that not listening was a form of disrespect. And disrespect around Roman DeLuca had consequences that outlasted the evening. Vivian did not move. She held her champagne glass and watched him with an expression she had spent years perfecting. Attentive, pleasant, slightly deferential. The expression of a woman who had made peace with her circumstances. It was the best performance of her life, and she had been giving it every single day for 4 years. "My wife," Roman said, walking toward her slowly, "is the most helpless human being I have ever known." He smiled as he said it, which made it land like a joke rather than an insult, and several men in the room chuckled. "I mean this sincerely. Vivian wouldn't survive a week without me." He spread his hands like he was delivering evidence to a jury. "She doesn't pay bills. She doesn't manage accounts. She doesn't know who fixes the plumbing or who handles the cars or how the household staff gets paid. She lives in this house like it's a hotel, and I'm the management." He reached her and put his hand on the small of her back, the possessive weight of it familiar and practiced. "Isn't that right, sweetheart?" The room waited. Vivian smiled. "You take such good care of everything, Roman." The men laughed. Roman laughed loudest. He squeezed her back and moved away, satisfied, and Vivian took a small sip of champagne that she didn't taste and thought about the 3 properties she currently held under a Delaware LLC that Roman's name had never appeared anywhere near. That was a Tuesday in February. By the following Saturday, Roman had escalated. The second party was smaller, 12 people instead of 40. An inner circle dinner in the formal dining room, which was worse in some ways because there was no crowd to disappear into. The table sat everyone at close range, and Roman had placed Vivian directly across from him so he could see her face all evening, which meant he was already thinking about the evening as a performance, and she was already thinking about how to survive it. The dinner was excellent. Roman's chef, a Sicilian man named Paolo, who had worked for the De Luca family for 11 years, produced a lamb course that silenced the table. The wine was a 2004 Barolo that Carmine Fazio actually wept over, briefly, before catching himself and pretending it was dust in his eye. For 40 minutes, the table was occupied with food and drink and the specific pleasure of men who had everything they wanted consuming more of it. Then Roman set down his fork and looked at Vivian across the table. "Tell me something," he said. "If I cut off your accounts tomorrow, what would you do?" The table went still. Not the comfortable quiet of people enjoying food, the particular stillness of people bracing for something. Vivian looked at him steadily. "I suppose I'd ask you why." "That's not what I'm asking. I'm asking what you would do, practically. Where would you go? How would you eat? How would you pay for anything?" He reached for his wine glass with the ease of a man asking about the weather. "I'm genuinely curious." Vivian set her fork down. She kept her voice even and her hands still. "I imagine I'd figure something out." Roman made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "She'd figure something out." He looked around the table, inviting everyone into the joke. "This woman has never written a check in her life. She's never negotiated a contract or managed a property or run a single thing that required her to understand how money actually works." He looked back at her, and his eyes were flat and very direct. "You'd be on your sister's couch inside a week. You know that." Nobody at the table spoke. Marco Vitelli studied his lamb. Judge Stein looked at the centerpiece. Carmine Fazio, who had known Vivian longer than most people in the room and occasionally demonstrated something close to human decency, looked briefly uncomfortable before his expression settled back into its usual blankness. Vivian picked up her fork. "The lamb is extraordinary tonight, Paolo," she said toward the kitchen doorway. Roman's jaw tightened fractionally. She had redirected the conversation, which he had not given her permission to do, and they both knew it. But making an issue of it now would expose the control underneath the joke, and Roman was too smart for that. He picked up his own fork. The table resumed. That night, after the guests had gone, Roman found her in the sitting room off the master bedroom. She was reading a novel, nothing significant, and he stood in the doorway for a moment with his suit jacket off and his sleeves rolled up and the look on his face that meant the evening wasn't finished yet. "You embarrassed me," he said. Vivian turned a page. "I complimented the chef. You redirected, in front of my people." He came into the room and sat in the chair across from her. "Don't do that again." She looked up from her book. "All right." He watched her for a long moment. "You think you're very composed." "I think Paolo makes exceptional lamb." Roman almost smiled. It was the closest they came, some nights, to something that resembled affection, this particular friction, the way she deflected and he pressed, and neither of them ever quite said what they were actually saying. Early in the marriage, she had believed it was a form of intimacy. She understood now that it was a form of control dressed in the clothes of wit. "I want you at the Marchetti dinner next Friday," he said. "Black dress? The one with the—" He gestured vaguely at his collarbone. "The Valentino." "Yes." "All right." He stood. He looked at her book briefly, with the vague contempt he reserved for anything that occupied her attention without his involvement. Then he left. Vivian listened to his footsteps move down the hallway. She listened to the sound of the bedroom door closing. She sat with her book in her hands and did not read a single word for the next 7 minutes while she waited for the pulse in her temples to settle. Then she set the book on the side table, reached under the cushion of the chair she was sitting in, and pulled out her phone. A separate phone. A phone Roman didn't know existed, registered to a name that wasn't hers, that connected to a cellular account paid through a prepaid arrangement that ran through a business account that ran through a holding company that had no visible connection to anything in Roman DeLuca's world. She opened an encrypted messaging application and typed a short message to a contact listed only as H Friday night. He'll be at the Marchetti dinner until at least midnight. I need 3 hours. The reply came in under 2 minutes. Confirmed. Office will be clear. She deleted the thread, powered down the phone, and placed it back under the cushion. Then she picked up her novel and found her page and read until her hands were completely steady. Her name before Roman was Vivian Claire Hartwell, and she had not always been the woman in the black dress holding a champagne glass she didn't drink from. There had been a version of her, not distant, only a decade back, who had been sharp and ambitious and genuinely interested in the mechanics of how businesses worked, how money moved, how power consolidated and dispersed. She had a degree in business administration from Northwestern and 2 years working at a mid-sized consulting firm before Roman DeLuca had walked into a fundraiser for a children's hospital and decided that she was exactly what his life was missing. He had been compelling. She needed to be honest with herself about that even now. Roman at 34 had possessed a quality that was difficult to name. Not exactly charisma, though he had that too, but something more specific. A certainty. He moved through rooms as though the rooms had been arranged for his arrival, and in the early months he had directed all of that certainty toward her, which felt, at 28, like being chosen by gravity itself. She had known what he was, or she had known enough. The DeLuca name was not obscure in Chicago's particular social ecosystem, and the kind of money Roman moved through the world didn't come from real estate development, which was the answer he gave at parties. She had told herself that she could navigate it. She had told herself a number of things in those early months that she would later have to dismantle carefully. The way you dismantle something built on a cracked foundation, piece by piece, quietly, so the whole structure doesn't come down on top of you at once. The marriage had started with a particular texture, expensive and attentive, and occasionally suffocating in a way she mistook for love. Roman gave her things the way Roman did everything, comprehensively and without asking what she actually wanted. The house on the North Shore, the wardrobe, the household staff who answered to him, not to her, which she had not understood the significance of for the first 2 years. The turning point had not been a single moment. That was the thing about turning points. People imagined them as dramatic, as a door swinging on its hinge. In her experience, they were more like water damage, slow, invisible. And by the time you saw the stain, the rot had already been going on for months. She had been 34 when she understood, with the specific clarity of a woman who has finally stopped arguing with the evidence, that Roman did not love her. He possessed her. The distinction had always existed, but she had spent years translating possession into love because the alternative meant she had made a catastrophic error in a life where she had generally been careful about errors. That understanding arrived on a Wednesday afternoon in October. She had been at a gallery opening, one of the rare occasions Roman permitted her to attend events alone, because the gallery owner's wife was a friend of his sister, and the event was considered socially safe. And she had gotten into a conversation with a woman named Helena who worked in private equity. They had talked for over an hour about market positioning and investment structures and the architecture of holding companies, and Vivian had felt something come alive in her that she had been so careful to keep dormant that she had almost forgotten it existed. Driving home, she had sat in the back of the car and felt the shape of the life she was living with complete, unmediated clarity. And then she had started planning. Patois. The plan had taken 4 years because she was not reckless. Recklessness was for people who had nothing to lose. Vivian had one thing she was not willing to lose, which was the plan itself. And so she had moved slowly and meticulously and without a single moment of impatience that she permitted herself to act on. The contact listed as H in her encrypted phone was Helena Marsh, now a business partner who had provided the initial architecture of the corporate structure Vivian built her professional life inside. A Delaware LLC that held a consulting company. A separate LLC that managed real estate acquisitions. A third entity, registered in Nevada, that handled investment holdings. Each entity connected to the next through management agreements and service contracts that were entirely legitimate, entirely invisible to anyone who wasn't looking, and designed to present a clean wall of paperwork between Vivian Hartwell DeLuca and anything she actually owned. The consulting company, operating under the name Claire Storm Advisory Group, had begun taking clients in its third year. She worked early mornings before Roman was awake, from a private office she maintained in a building downtown under a registered business address that listed a property management company as the tenant. She worked under her maiden name professionally. She wore different clothes to the office than she wore in Roman's world. She had built, with extraordinary care, a person who existed in parallel to the person Roman saw every day and who had almost nothing in common with the woman in the black dress at the North Shore dinners. Claire Storm's revenue in its second year of operation had been $340,000. In its third year, $890,000. In the year currently in progress, she was tracking toward $1.4 million, driven primarily by 3 long-term corporate clients who valued her work for reasons that had nothing to do with her last name. The real estate portfolio was smaller but more stable. 4 properties, a mixed-use building in Wicker Park, a 2-unit in Logan Square, a commercial space in the West Loop leased to a restaurant group, and a luxury penthouse in the Streeterville neighborhood that she had leased to a corporate tenant for the past 18 months, but had quietly begun the process of reclaiming for personal occupancy. She had enough. She had known she had enough for at least 8 months. The question had never been whether she was ready. The question had been what she was waiting for. Standing in the salon in the too short black dress on that Saturday in February, watching Roman work the room and feeling his hand on the small of her back like a brand, she understood that she was waiting for him to give her an opening she could step through cleanly. A moment so unambiguous that she could walk through it without looking back. She did not have to wait much longer. The party where it happened was Roman's semi-annual gathering, a tradition the organization maintained twice a year, spring and fall, that functioned simultaneously as a social event and a subtle demonstration of hierarchy. Couples came. Certain politicians came. Business associates with legitimate faces came and sat beside men with very different faces, and Roman presided over all of it with the ease of a man who had spent 30 years building a world calibrated to his specific appetites. Vivian had prepared for this particular evening for 3 weeks, not the way she prepared for most of his events. The dress selection and the conversations to avoid and the exits to maintain awareness of. She had prepared in a different way, in the Streeterville office, in the hours between 4 and 6 in the morning when the city was still dark, and Roman was still sleeping, and the life she had built existed without interference. She had moved the penthouse tenants out 2 weeks prior, citing a planned renovation. The space was hers now, available, furnished with a basic collection of pieces she had purchased and stored. She had transferred certain files from her office to a secure cloud location. She had arranged for 3 months of personal operating expenses to be accessible in a personal account under a name she hadn't used in 6 years. She had spoken to her attorney, a woman in a firm that had no connection to any DeLuca interest, and had signed and notarized a set of divorce papers that were currently in an envelope in her home office, in the bottom drawer of a desk Roman had never opened. She had, in other words, packed the metaphorical bags long before she packed the actual ones. The gathering began at 7. By 9, the room was at its fullest and warmest and most relaxed, the particular looseness of a group of powerful people who believed themselves completely secure. Vivian moved through it all with the skill of someone who had been practicing invisibility for years. She spoke when spoken to. She laughed when laughter was warranted. She maintained the careful fiction of a woman who existed in relation to a man rather than in relation to herself. Roman had been drinking since 6, which was earlier than usual, which she noted without expression. At 9:45, he found her near the windows overlooking the lake and touched her arm to stop her mid-step. "Stay close tonight," he said. It wasn't a request. "Of course," she said. At 10:15, he called the room to attention. It was subtle, no clinking of glass, just Roman raising his voice to a particular register that his people recognized as requiring their attention. The room reoriented toward him with the practiced ease of long habit. He talked for a few minutes about nothing in particular. A business development he was pleased about, a trip he was planning, the quality of the bourbon which he credited to a contact who was present and who acknowledged the compliment with the correct degree of modesty. Then he looked across the room at Vivian, and she saw the calculation in his eyes, even at that distance. and she understood that this was the moment he had been building toward all evening. "I want to try something," Roman said, still addressing the room but watching her. "An experiment." He moved through the gathered crowd until he stood at the room's center. "My wife and I have been together for 10 years, married for 9. He paused. 9 years is a long time to be with someone. The room was quiet. "I'm going to ask her something tonight," Roman said, "in front of all of you." He looked at her directly now. "Vivian, come here." She crossed the room. She held her champagne glass because setting it down would have looked like preparation for something, and she was not ready to show him that yet. She stopped 2 feet from him, close enough that the conversation would be heard by everyone in the room, far enough that she could see his whole face. "Here's what I've decided," Roman said. His voice was pleasant. He had the tone of a man announcing something reasonable. "I've decided I don't want to be married anymore." He paused. "Not to someone who contributes nothing, not to someone who takes everything I provide and gives nothing in return except," he gestured vaguely at her, "presence, decorative presence." He looked around the room briefly, taking in his audience. "So here's what's going to happen, right now, in front of everyone here." He looked back at her. "You're going to beg me to stay married to you, make a case, tell me why I should keep you, or," he nodded toward the front door, "you walk out that door, and we're done." The room was completely still. Vivian looked at him. She looked at him for a long moment, long enough that several people in the room shifted with discomfort, uncertain what was about to happen. She looked at him the way she had looked at the life she was living from the back of a car on an October afternoon 6 years ago, with complete, unmediated clarity. She set her champagne glass down on the side table to her left. "I'll need a few minutes," she said. Roman blinked. "For what?" "To get my things." She walked upstairs. Her feet on the marble staircase made a sound that echoed slightly in the silent house. She did not hurry. She walked at a pace she found comfortable, which was not slow and was not rushed, and she did not look back. The master bedroom was quiet and unchanged. She went to the closet and pulled out 2 suitcases, a large one and a carry-on, that she had packed and repacked mentally so many times that the physical action took 11 minutes. She chose practically. She chose things that were hers before the marriage, things she had purchased with her own money, things Roman had never touched. She left the Valentino. She left 6 of the 7 dresses he'd selected for her over the years. She left the jewelry she'd been given rather than chosen. She took the 1 ring she'd bought herself, a simple white gold band she wore on her right hand, which Roman had always considered insignificant. She zipped the cases. She straightened. She went to the home office and opened the bottom drawer of the desk and took out the envelope. She carried her 2 suitcases and her envelope downstairs. The party guests were exactly where she'd left them. Nobody had moved, she noticed, as if the room had been in suspension the whole time she was upstairs. Roman stood in the center of the salon with an expression she had never seen on his face before, which was the expression of a man who has reached for something he expected to be there and found empty air. She set the suitcases by the front door. She walked to the dining table and placed the envelope on the polished wood surface. She picked up her coat from the coat room by the entrance. She opened the front door. The wind off the lake came through immediately, 12 degrees of it, honest and cold and entirely indifferent. She did not look at Roman. She did not look at the room. She walked out. The door closed behind her with a sound that was not a slam. It was quiet. Final. The sound of something that had been holding on for a very long time simply letting go. Outside, the night was clear and punishing and completely her own. She put on her coat as she walked to the car she had arranged 3 days earlier. Not a car Roman owned, not a car any of his people knew. And she got in and set her 2 suitcases on the back seat beside her and told the driver the address. The address of the penthouse in Streeterville. The penthouse she owned. The life she had built while Roman was busy believing she had none. The car pulled away from the North Shore estate, and Vivian Hartwell did not look through the rear window. There was nothing back there she needed to see. Everything she was moving toward was ahead of her, in the dark, waiting to be illuminated. What she did not know, what she could not have known in the clean certainty of that departure, was that Roman DeLuca would not react the way she had prepared for him to react. She had anticipated rage. She had prepared for legal maneuvers and financial obstruction, and the particular aggression of a powerful man who believed he was being robbed of something that belonged to him. She had not prepared for the phone call that would come at 2:47 in the morning from a number she didn't recognize. She had not prepared for the 3 words the voice on the other end would say before the line went dead. She had not prepared for what those 3 words would mean about the 4 years she'd spent building her escape. And who else, it turned out, had been watching. The phone call came at 2:47 in the morning. Vivian was still awake. She had not expected to sleep. Not on the first night, not in a bed she had never slept in before, in a penthouse that smelled of fresh paint and the particular emptiness of a space that had been recently vacated. She was sitting at the kitchen island in her coat, still wearing it, with a glass of water she hadn't touched, and her real phone face up on the counter and the other phone, the encrypted one, in her jacket pocket pressing against her ribs. The call came on the regular phone. The number was a 312 area code she didn't recognize. She picked up on the second ring. 3 words, delivered in a voice she didn't know, flat and unhurried and completely without effect. They found Helena. Then the line went dead. Vivian set the phone down on the counter. She looked at the water glass. She looked at the dark windows and the city lights below them and the black expanse of the lake beyond. She sat with what she had just heard, the way you sit with a piece of information that changes the geometry of everything around it. Still, careful, not allowing the implications to move faster than she could track them. Helena Marsh was not supposed to be findable. That had been the first condition of their working relationship, established at the beginning and maintained with the same rigor Vivian applied to everything in the structure she had built. Helena operated through a separate professional identity. She had no visible connection to Claire Storm or to any of the LLCs or to Vivian Hartwell DeLuca. She was by design a wall. If someone had found Helena, it meant the wall had a crack. And if the wall had a crack, the question was not whether Roman knew. The question was how much he knew and how long he had known it and what he intended to do with the information. Vivian picked up the encrypted phone. She typed a single message to Helena's number. "Are you safe?" No question mark. She had learned from Helena that question marks in written communication created a register of uncertainty that was sometimes better avoided. The reply took 4 minutes, which was 3 minutes and 45 seconds longer than Helena's usual response time. "Yes, we need to talk, not on this line." Vivian stared at that for a moment. Then she put both phones in her coat pocket and went to the window and looked at Chicago for a long time, without thinking about anything specific, which was what she did when she needed her mind to work without the interference of her own anxiety. By 4 in the morning, she had a list. Roman DeLuca did not sleep the night Vivian left. He stood in the dining room for a long time after the last guest had gone, looking at the envelope on the table. He didn't open it immediately. He stood with his jacket off and his shirt untucked and a glass of bourbon that he periodically raised to his mouth without drinking from. And he looked at the envelope the way he looked at things he was trying to understand without the benefit of having expected them. Carmine Fazio was the last to leave, which was not an accident. Carmine had been with the DeLuca family since Roman's father ran the organization, and he had a quality that was rare in Roman's world: the ability to be present without filling silence with words. He stood near the doorway and waited until Roman acknowledged him. "Go home, Carmine." "You sure?" "I said go home." Carmine looked at the envelope on the table. He looked at Roman. His expression did not change in any visible way, but something moved behind his eyes that Roman recognized from decades of reading that particular face. "Don't," Roman said. "I'm not saying anything." "You're thinking it loud enough." Carmine put on his coat. "Call me in the morning. I'll call you when I feel like calling you." Carmine left. Roman heard the front door close and the security system register the departure, and the silence of the house settle around him like something with physical weight. He opened the envelope at midnight. The divorce papers were thorough. He could see that without reading them closely, the kind of thorough that meant someone had been working on this for a long time with a very good attorney, which meant Vivian had an attorney Roman didn't know about, which meant she had been having conversations Roman didn't know about, which meant the performance he had been watching for years was exactly that. He sat down at the dining table with the papers in front of him and his bourbon untouched. He thought about the dinner 2 weeks ago, the way she had redirected the conversation about her helplessness with a comment about the lamb. He had read it as deflection, which it was. What he had not read was what was underneath the deflection. Not fear, not wounded pride, but the completely composed response of a woman who could afford to let him talk, because nothing he said actually threatened her. He picked up his phone and called Mickey Doyle, who ran his investigative operations and answered at any hour without complaint, which was why Roman paid him what he paid him. "I need you to look into something," Roman said when Mickey picked up. "Tonight? Now." The meeting with Helena happened 4 days later, not in Chicago. Helena had insisted on that, a short drive to a hotel conference room in Evanston, a space reserved under a business name that neither of them used for anything else. Helena arrived first and was sitting at the table with a laptop open and a coffee going cold when Vivian walked in. Helena Marsh was 51, with short silver hair and the unhurried manner of someone who had spent decades operating in spaces where panic was both common and useless. She had built and sold 2 companies before pivoting to the work she did now, private financial architecture for people who needed complexity and discretion in equal measure. She and Vivian had worked together for 4 years, and in that time had spoken on the phone perhaps 40 times. They communicated better in writing. Vivian sat down across from her. "Tell me," Vivian said. Helena turned the laptop to face her. On the screen was a photograph, grainy, taken from a distance, through the window of what appeared to be Helena's office building, of Helena at her desk. "That was taken 8 days ago," Helena said. "I found it because I found the person who took it. He was not careful about his email." Vivian looked at the photograph. "DeLuca. Almost certainly. The operative is a man named Doyle. He works investigative for several organized crime-adjacent clients in the Chicago area. He's used by at least 3 organizations I'm aware of." "What does Doyle know?" "He knows I exist. He knows I have a professional relationship with an entity called Claire Storm Advisory Group." Helena picked up her coffee, looked at it, set it back down. "He does not yet know the ownership structure of Claire Storm. That connection is still clean." "Yet," Vivian said. "Yet," Helena agreed. Vivian looked at the photograph again. 8 days ago meant Roman had begun investigating before the party, before the divorce papers, which meant the performance at the party, the public humiliation, the ultimatum, had not been spontaneous. Roman had already been digging. The party had been a test of a different kind than she had understood it to be in the moment. "He was checking," Vivian said, mostly to herself. "Checking what?" "Whether I knew he was looking." She sat back. "He wanted to see how I'd react, whether I'd panic, whether I'd make a move that showed him something." Helena considered this. "And instead you walked out, which tells him nothing about what I have, only that I was ready to leave. That's still a significant reveal." "I know." They sat with that for a moment. Outside, traffic moved on the street below, and someone in an adjacent room laughed at something, and the ordinary world continued its ordinary operations around them. "The question," Helena said, "is how long before Doyle finds the Claire Storm connection? How long do you estimate? If he's competent and has access to the right databases, 2 weeks, maybe 3. Can we move anything before then? Some things. Not all of it. Moving too fast creates its own visibility." Vivian nodded. She looked at her hands on the table. They were still, which she was conscious of maintaining. "There's something else," Helena said. Vivian looked up. "The person who called you the night you left, the 312 number." Helena hesitated, which was unusual for her. "That wasn't someone from my network." The room felt different suddenly. Not dangerous exactly, but altered. "Then who was it?" Vivian said. "I don't know. I've been trying to trace it. The number routes through a forwarding service and then dead ends at a prepaid account that was activated and discarded within 24 hours of your call." She looked at Vivian directly. "Someone knew my name. Someone knew to call you. Someone knew you'd left that night and had a phone number for you that isn't in any system I'm aware of. Someone inside Roman's organization, possibly, or someone who watches Roman's organization." Helena paused. "There's a third possibility." "Someone who's been watching me," Vivian said. Helena said nothing, which was confirmation of a kind. Roman called her on the 5th day. She was at the Claire Storm office, the real one, not the registered address, the actual working space on the 14th floor of a building in the West Loop that she had occupied for 3 years without incident. She was on a call with one of her corporate clients when Roman's name appeared on her personal phone screen, and she experienced the specific sensation of two worlds colliding that she had spent 4 years trying to prevent. She finished her client call. She sat for a moment, then she called him back. He picked up before the first ring completed. "Where are you?" he said. Not a question. "That's not information you're entitled to anymore, Roman." A silence. She could hear him breathing, slow, measured, the particular breath of a man working hard to control his register. "The papers," he said. "I want to talk about the papers. My attorney will be in contact with yours." "I don't want to talk to attorneys. I want to talk to you." "Roman, one meeting. That's all I'm asking." She looked at her office, the clean desk, the framed photographs she had chosen herself, the city visible through the window on terms entirely her own. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's not— I said I'll think about it." She paused. "Don't call this number again without going through my attorney first." She hung up. Her hands, she noticed, were not entirely still. The meeting she did not agree to happened anyway, in a manner she had not anticipated. 12 days after she left, Vivian walked out of a lunch meeting in the Loop and found Carmine Fazio standing beside her car. Not a threatening posture. He was leaning against the passenger side with his hands in his coat pockets and his collar up against the March wind, and he looked tired in a way she associated with men who were managing situations that were exhausting them. She stopped. She assessed the street. Crowded, public, midday. She walked toward him. "Carmine." "Vivian." He nodded at her. "You look well." "What do you want?" He exhaled, fog in the cold air. "He's going to find it," he said. "Whatever you've built. Doyle is good and Roman is motivated and he's going to find it." She looked at him without expression. "Is that a threat?" "No." He seemed genuinely tired of the word. "It's information. There's a difference. I know you know the difference." "Why are you telling me?" He looked at the street for a moment. A cab pushed through an intersection. Somewhere above them, a window unit rattled in the cold. "Because I've known you for 9 years, he said, "and because—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider the word he'd been about to use. "Because whatever you did it quiet. You did it careful. You didn't hurt anyone." He looked at her. "Roman's going to treat it like you robbed him. I want you to know that." "I know that. He's already talking about the prenuptial." She had expected this. The prenuptial agreement from their marriage was substantial and had been drafted entirely by Roman's attorneys, which was to say, it had been drafted entirely in Roman's interest. It would make the divorce expensive and slow and visible in ways she had tried to plan for. "Let him," she said. Carmine studied her. "You're not worried." "I didn't say that." "You look like someone who's not worried." She looked at him directly. "Carmine, why are you actually here?" He was quiet for a moment. The wind moved between them. "He asked me to find you," he said. "He doesn't know that I found you. When I go back, I'm going to tell him I couldn't." She processed that. "Why?" "Because I'm tired," he said, with a flatness that sounded entirely genuine. "I'm 63 years old, and I'm tired of watching him treat people like furniture and then act surprised when the furniture leaves." He pulled his coat tighter. "That's all I have for you. Just the warning." He pushed off the car and walked away from her down the sidewalk, his shoulders set against the cold, and she watched him go until he turned a corner and was gone. She stood beside her car for a moment with the information settling around her. Roman knew she had something. Doyle was getting close. Someone unknown had warned her about Helena. And now Carmine Fazio, who had been with the DeLuca family for 30 years, was quietly breaking rank in a way that was small enough to be deniable and significant enough to matter. The structure she had built was still intact, but the ground it was standing on was less stable than it had been 2 weeks ago. She got in her car. She needed to make 3 calls, and she needed to make them in the right order, and she needed to think clearly while she made them. She was reaching for her phone when it buzzed in her hand. A message on the encrypted line. Not Helena's number, not any number she recognized. 4 words this time. Doyle found the LLC. She stared at the screen. The LLC. if they meant what she thought they meant, was the Nevada holding entity, the investment portfolio. Not Clairstorm, not the real estate, but the investments, which were the largest single concentration of her net worth outside the consulting business. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Another message arrived before she could respond. Roman sees everything tomorrow morning. You have tonight. She put the phone down on the passenger seat. She looked through the windshield at the street in front of her, at the ordinary Thursday afternoon moving past without awareness of what was collapsing inside the car. One night. She had built this structure over 4 years. She had moved with patience and precision and a level of care that she had been genuinely proud of. And now she had one night to decide how much of it she could protect and how much she was willing to sacrifice, and what it meant that someone inside Roman's operation, or close enough to it to have access to Doyle's findings, was feeding her information in real time, because that was the thing she could not ignore any longer. Someone was helping her, and she had absolutely no idea. She had absolutely no idea who was helping her, and that was the most dangerous part of all. Vivian sat in the parked car for 90 seconds. She counted them, deliberately, because 90 seconds of stillness was what she allowed herself before action became mandatory. Then she picked up the encrypted phone and typed a single message back to the unknown number. Who are you? No reply came. She waited 3 minutes. Nothing. The number, she already suspected, was another prepaid that would be dead within the hour. She started the car. The Nevada LLC held approximately $2.3 million in a diversified investment portfolio that had been accumulating quietly for 2.5 years. If Roman's investigator had found it, and if Roman was going to have that information by morning, she had somewhere between 8 and 14 hours to execute a series of financial maneuvers that her attorney had outlined 18 months ago as a contingency, a sequence of transfers and liquidations designed to move assets into structures with an additional layer of separation before any legal hold could be placed. The problem was that her attorney needed to initiate those moves, and her attorney was a woman named Sandra Osei, who worked out of a firm in River North, and who, as of 6 o'clock on a Thursday evening, was not answering her office line. Vivian called Helena. Helena picked up in one ring, which meant she had been waiting. I know, Helena said before Vivian spoke. How long have you known? I found out 40 minutes ago. I've been trying to reach you. I was with a client. A pause. Can we move the Nevada holdings tonight? Some of it. The liquid positions, yes. The fund investments have lockup periods. We can't touch those without triggering reporting requirements that will make everything worse. How much can we protect? A brief silence while Helena calculated. Maybe 60%, if Sandra can get the paperwork filed before 9 a.m. tomorrow. After that, the window closes. I can't reach Sandra. I know. I have a number for her personal cell. I'll handle it. Another pause, shorter. Vivian, there's something else. The way Helena said it, the particular weight she put on the word else, made Vivian's hands tighten on the steering wheel. Tell me. The person who found the LLC, Doyle, he didn't find it through the corporate registry. The ownership chain is too clean for that. Someone gave him a specific document. Helena's voice was careful and precise in the way it got when she was delivering information she did not want to deliver. A document that should exist in exactly 3 places. My files, Sandra's files, and yours. The street outside the windshield looked exactly as it had 30 seconds ago. The same afternoon light, the same pedestrians, the same ordinary Thursday. Say it, Vivian said. Someone with access to one of those 3 locations gave Doyle a direct route to the Nevada entity. This wasn't investigative work. This was a handoff. Vivian sat with that. It wasn't you, Vivian said. Not a question. No. It wasn't me. No, Helena said again, quietly. The implication sat between them on the line like something with its own weight. I need to call you back, Vivian said. She hung up. She pulled back onto the street. She drove without a destination for 4 blocks, then pulled over again because driving without focus was a way of making herself feel like she was doing something when what she actually needed was to think. Sandra Osei had been her attorney for 3 years. Sandra had been recommended by Helena. Sandra's firm had no connection to Roman's world. Vivian had verified that independently before their first meeting, running background through a research service she paid for out of a cash account. Sandra was meticulous and careful and had never given Vivian any reason for doubt. But Sandra had the document. Sandra had the ownership structure laid out in her client files. And someone had given Mickey Doyle a direct route to the Nevada LLC. Vivian picked up her regular phone and opened her contacts and stared at Sandra Osei's name for a long moment. Then she put the phone back down. If Sandra had been compromised, voluntarily or otherwise, calling her now would accomplish nothing except alerting whoever was on the other side that Vivian knew. She needed to think about this differently. She needed to think about who benefited. She went to the Clarestorm office because it was the one space she was certain was secure. She had swept it herself, twice in the past month, a skill she had learned from a retired federal investigator she'd hired 2 years ago under the pretense of a security consultation. She went in through the building's side entrance, took the stairs instead of the elevator, and let herself into the darkened office without turning on the overhead lights. She sat at her desk in the light from the city outside and opened her laptop. She spent the next 2 hours doing what she had always done when a problem exceeded the boundaries of her prepared responses. She mapped it. Not on paper. In her head, with the kind of precision that had always been her actual strongest quality, the thing Roman had systematically worked to make invisible because a wife with a functional analytical mind was a wife who could see through things. Facts. Doyle received a document. The document existed in 3 locations. Helena was clean, she herself was clean, which left Sandra. Either Sandra had been turned, or Sandra's files had been accessed without her knowledge, which meant someone had gotten into a secure law firm's client database, which required resources and access that pointed back toward one place. Roman's organization. But Roman had hired Doyle to find what Vivian had built. If Roman already had someone inside Sandra's files, why send Doyle on an investigative dig? Why not go directly to the source? Unless Doyle wasn't working for Roman alone, unless someone else had access to Sandra's files and had fed the document to Doyle independently. Someone who wanted Roman to find the Nevada LLC. Someone who wanted to create pressure on Vivian, on Roman, on the situation, for reasons she hadn't mapped yet. She was still sitting with this when the door of the office opened. She did not move. Her hand went to the side drawer of her desk where she kept a canister of defense spray, and she had it in her palm before the overhead lights came on. Sandra Osei stood in the doorway. She was 54, a small woman with close-cropped natural hair and the self-possessed bearing of someone who had spent decades being the most prepared person in any room she entered. Tonight she looked like she hadn't slept in 2 days. Her coat was on wrong. The left side collar was tucked under itself in a way Sandra, who was meticulous about her appearance, would never have permitted if she were in a normal state. Vivian looked at her. She kept the defense spray in her hand below the desk level. "How did you know I was here?" Vivian said. "I didn't. I went to your building first, then I tried here." Sandra stepped into the room. Her eyes moved to Vivian's hand position and back up. "I need to tell you something before you hear it from anyone else." "Start talking." Sandra pulled out the chair across from Vivian's desk and sat down without being invited. She put her bag on the floor. She looked at her own hands for a moment, and what Vivian saw in that gesture, the particular quality of it, was not guilt. It was exhaustion and something close to grief. "My office was accessed," Sandra said, 6 days ago. I found out this morning through a security alert in our system that I should have been notified about immediately, but that someone in our IT department flagged as low priority." Her voice was controlled, but the control was costing her something. "Someone went into my client files. I don't know how they got in. I have the firm's cybersecurity team working on it right now." Vivian looked at her steadily. "What was taken?" "The Nevada entity documentation, the ownership structure memorandum, the asset schedule. Everything Doyle needed." Sandra looked up sharply. "You know about Doyle." "I know about Doyle." A silence moved through the room. Below the windows, the city ran its usual nighttime operations, indifferent and enormous. "This wasn't me, Vivian," Sandra said. "I know it wasn't you." "What?" Something shifted in Sandra's posture. Not relief, exactly. More like the specific release of a person who has been carrying a weight and has just been told they can set it down temporarily. "But it came from your office," Vivian said, "which means someone wanted it to look like it came from inside my own network." Yes, someone who knew about our working relationship and knew the file existed and had the technical capacity to access a law firm's secure system. Vivian set the defense spray on the desk where Sandra could see it, deliberately, and then set her hands flat on either side of her laptop. Who in Roman's organization has that capacity? Sandra shook her head. I don't know his organization. Think about the technical piece. Bypassing a law firm's security infrastructure. That's not a standard private investigator capability. That's specialized. Forensics suggests it was accessed through a vulnerability in our external client portal. Someone who knew the architecture. Sandra paused. Or someone who had help from someone who knew it. Vivian thought about that. She thought about the unknown number, the prepaid phones, the pattern of information arriving precisely timed, precisely targeted, from a source with detailed knowledge of Roman's investigative activities, and now, apparently, the technical resources to penetrate secured systems. Whoever broke into your system also warned me, Vivian said. They told me Doyle had found the LLC before Roman knew the results. They gave me tonight. Sandra stared at her. Why would someone do both? That, Vivian said, is the question I haven't answered yet. She got the answer at 11:47 that night, and it was worse than anything she had prepared for. She was back at the penthouse. Helena had confirmed that Sandra had executed the emergency transfers. 61% of the Nevada portfolio moved into a new structure before the close of business. The paperwork filed and time-stamped. It wasn't everything, but it was survivable. The Clarestorm revenue was untouched. The real estate was untouched. She had lost ground, but not the war. She was sitting at the kitchen island again, same spot as the night she'd left Roman, and she was allowing herself to feel something close to controlled relief when the intercom from the building lobby buzzed. She looked at the intercom panel. The penthouse was not listed under her name. The building staff knew her as the property owner's representative. No one was supposed to know this address. She pressed the intercom. Who is it? The voice that came back was one she recognized immediately, and the recognition hit her with a physical quality, something that moved through her chest and down into her stomach and left a cold trace behind it. It's James, the voice said. James Hartwell. Vivian, please. I need to come up. Her brother. She stood at the intercom for 3 full seconds, then she pressed the door release. James Hartwell was 35, 3 years younger than Vivian, and they had not spoken in 14 months. The last conversation had ended badly. Not with anger, which would have been easier, but with the quiet, devastating acknowledgement that they had been moving in different directions for long enough that the distance between them was no longer temporary. James had a gambling problem that had been in various stages of management and relapse for the past 7 years. Roman had lent him money twice during the marriage, significant amounts, the kind that created obligation rather than dissolving it. Vivian had paid one of those debts herself, out of her own Clarestorm funds, without James knowing the source. She had not told James about any of what she'd built. She had not told anyone in her family. They were not part of the structure because the structure required clean edges. And James, whom she loved with the specific exhausting love of someone who has watched a person they care about repeatedly destroy what's good in their own life, was not a clean edge. He came off the elevator looking like the 14 months had been longer than that. Thinner. The particular thinness of someone who has been under sustained stress and has lost the ability to eat properly. His coat was good, too good for how he'd been living, which she noted automatically. And his eyes, when they found her in the penthouse doorway, had the quality of a person who has arrived at the end of a very long road and is not sure what they're going to find there. How do you know this address? She said. He stopped in the hallway. He didn't try to come closer. I need to tell you something. How do you know this address, James? He looked at her for a moment. His jaw moved. I've known it for 4 months. The cold trace in her chest spread. Say the rest of it, she said. He came inside because she moved back from the doorway, not because she wanted him to, but because having this conversation in a hallway was worse. He stood in her kitchen and looked at the space the way people look at spaces when they're buying time to find the beginning of something they don't know how to say. Roman came to me, he said, 8 months ago. She was still, completely still. He knew about my situation, the debts, James stopped, started again. He said he wasn't going to collect on what I owed him, that he was going to forgive the debt and put money on top of it, A significant amount. His voice was even and terrible. All I had to do was get close to you again, find out what you were doing, report back. The kitchen was very quiet. You reported back, Vivian said. His voice broke briefly, and he steadied it. Not everything. I swear to you, not everything. I didn't give him the Clarestorm information. I didn't tell him about Helena, but the Nevada entity. He stopped. I found a document in your personal files. When you left your laptop open at Mom's birthday in September, I photographed it. I didn't know what I was giving him. I didn't understand what it meant. Vivian looked at her brother. She looked at the coat that was too good for how he'd been living. She felt something move through her that was not anger. Anger was too simple for this, too clean. What she felt was the particular quality of a betrayal that has come from the direction you never defended because you never believed it would come from there. You, she said, are the anonymous number. Something moved across his face. I'm trying to fix it. You've been warning me. Since the night you left, yes. I didn't know he was going to use it the way he did. I thought he was just trying to understand what you'd been doing. I didn't think... He pressed his hands flat on the kitchen counter. I've been trying to slow it down. To give you time. The cybersecurity breach at Sandra's office. That was me giving Doyle a trail that led there instead of to Clarestorm. I was trying to buy you time to move the Nevada assets. She processed this. The cybersecurity breach hadn't been Roman's doing. It had been James, trying to redirect Doyle away from something more damaging and towards something Vivian could survive losing. How much does Roman know, she said. Exactly. Everything you told him. James closed his eyes briefly. The Nevada LLC. The approximate value. Your general independence from him financially. He opened them. He doesn't know about Clarestorm. He doesn't know about the real estate portfolio. He doesn't know about Helena. What does he think he has? He thinks he has proof that you hid assets during the marriage. He's going to use it in the divorce proceedings to argue bad faith, to go after the prenuptial enforcement. She stood very still with that information. It was serious. The prenuptial agreement was Roman's largest legal weapon, and he had been intending to use it regardless. But hidden assets during the marriage was the kind of allegation that could color the entire proceeding, that could give a judge reason to look more carefully at everything, that could make what she had built visible in ways she had spent 4 years preventing. But it wasn't Clarestorm. It wasn't the real estate. It wasn't the full picture. Get out, she said. James looked at her. Vivian, I'm not going to talk to you right now. I need you to leave. I'm trying to tell you I'm sorry. I'm trying to help you. You already helped me enough. Her voice was flat and completely steady. You can help me one more time by leaving and not contacting me again until I reach out to you. Do you understand? He looked at her for a long moment, with the expression of someone who knows they deserve exactly what they're receiving and finds it no easier for the knowing. Then he picked up his coat and walked to the elevator, and she watched the doors close on his face and stood in her kitchen alone. She stood there for 4 minutes. She counted them. Then she sat down, opened her laptop, and began to work. Because Roman DeLuca was going to walk into his attorney's office tomorrow morning with information that could damage everything she had built, and she had between now and tomorrow morning to change the conditions of what he found when she worked through the night without sleeping. Not because she was running on adrenaline. Adrenaline was a response to surprise, and Vivian was past surprise now. She worked with the cold, deliberate focus of someone who has located the exact dimensions of the hole they are in and is measuring the walls before deciding how to climb out. The betrayal was processed and filed, and she would feel it fully later, in some quieter moment that did not yet exist. Right now, it was just data. James had given Roman the Nevada LLC. Roman had the documentation. Roman's attorney would receive it in the morning. She had 6 hours. She called Helena at midnight and kept her on the line for 40 minutes. She called Sandra at 12:50 and kept her on the line for 30. By 2 in the morning, she had a strategy that was not clean and was not what she had originally planned and required her to expose things she had intended to keep protected. But it was a strategy which was more than she'd had at 11:47 when her brother had walked out of her elevator. The core of it was this. Roman was going to walk into his attorney's office with evidence of one hidden asset. Vivian was going to walk into her own attorney's office first and voluntarily disclose everything, all of it, Clarestorm, the real estate portfolio, the investment holdings, including the Nevada LLC, the full 4-year picture. Helena had said, on the midnight call, "That's an enormous risk." "It's the opposite," Vivian had said. "If Roman reveals the Nevada entity and nothing else surfaces, it looks like concealment. If I walk in first and lay everything on the table with full documentation and a clear accounting, it looks like transparency. It changes the story from hidden assets to independent assets built with my own labor during the marriage." "Illinois is a marital property state," Sandra had said on the second call. "Some of what you've built will be contestable." "I know. You could lose a significant portion." "I know that too." "Is the priority protecting the assets or ending the marriage clean?" Vivian had looked at the city through the penthouse windows at 3 in the morning, at the lights that didn't know anything about what was happening inside this building. "Ending it clean," she had said. "The assets I can rebuild. I only get one shot at walking out of this on my own terms." Sandra had been quiet for a moment. "All right, I'll have the disclosure package ready by 7 a.m. I need you in my office at 8. "I'll be there at 7:30. She hung up. She set her phone down. She sat in the dark and quiet of her kitchen for exactly 4 minutes, and then she went to the bedroom and lay down fully clothed on top of the covers and set her alarm for 5:45 and closed her eyes. She did not sleep, but she rested, which was not the same thing, and was, tonight, enough. Roman DeLuca's attorney was a man named Frank Castellano, who operated out of a suite in the Wrigley building, and who had spent 22 years making problems for Roman's organization disappear inside the machinery of the law. He was precise, humorless, and entirely without illusion about what his client was, and what the legal system was, and how the two interacted when enough money was applied correctly. At 8:15 in the morning, Castellano's office received a filing notification from the office of Sandra Osei on behalf of Vivian Hartwell, containing a voluntary financial disclosure of assets accumulated during the marriage. A document so thorough and so carefully sourced that Castellano read it twice before he called Roman. Roman was at his desk at the North Shore estate. He had the Doyle report in front of him. He had been looking at it since 7 a.m., the way he looked at intelligence before an operation, mapping it, planning the sequence of moves, working out where to apply pressure and what yield he expected at each point. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. He picked up. "Tell me you have good news," he said. "She filed first," Castellano said. A silence. "Explain that," Roman said. Castellano explained it. Roman listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. His hand on the desk was flat and still. When Castellano finished, Roman said, "What does it mean for the prenuptial enforcement?" "It complicates it significantly. She's not concealing assets. She's disclosing them proactively, with documentation going back 4 years, framed as independently generated income from professional services. Her attorney is going to argue that Claire Storm and the real estate acquisitions are separate property under business income earned through her own labor." Castellano paused. "It's not a certain argument, but it's a credible one. And the fact that she filed voluntarily before we moved will make any claim of bad faith very difficult to sustain." Roman said nothing for a moment. Outside his study window, the lake was gray and flat, and the sky above it was the same gray, the horizon line invisible. "She knew we had the Nevada entity," he said. "It wasn't a question. She must have. Which means Doyle has a leak." Castellano said nothing. "Get me Doyle," Roman said. "Today." He hung up. He sat at his desk for a long moment. Then he picked up the Doyle report and looked at it again. And what he was looking for now was not the information about what Vivian had built, but the question of how she had known he was coming. The answer came to him 20 minutes later with a quality that was different from his usual analytic process. Not deductive, but visceral, a recognition that moved up from somewhere below thought. He picked up his phone and called Carmine Fazio. Carmine arrived at the North Shore estate at 10:30. He came into the study and sat across from Roman's desk with the ease of a man who had been in that chair 1,000 times, in good situations and bad ones, and had learned to distinguish between them by the temperature in the room rather than Roman's face, which was not always reliable. The temperature was very cold. I'm going to ask you something once, Roman said. Carmine waited. Did you find her? A pause. Very short. But Roman had known Carmine for 30 years, and short pauses from Carmine were not nothing. No, Carmine said. Roman looked at him for a long time. You're lying to me. Carmine met his eyes without flinching. I looked. I couldn't locate her. You've been with my family since my father ran this organization. Roman's voice was completely level. In 30 years, you have never lied to me directly. You've withheld. You've redirected. You've told me things in ways that allowed me to hear what I wanted to hear. He leaned forward slightly. But you have never looked me in the face and said something you knew to be false, until right now. Carmine's expression did not change, but the stillness in him had a different quality now. Not the stillness of a man with nothing to hide, but the stillness of a man who has decided what he will and will not say, and has made that decision fully. Roman, don't. Roman stood up. He came around the desk and stood near the window with his back to Carmine, looking at the gray lake. His voice, when he spoke again, was quieter and more controlled and therefore more dangerous. She filed a full disclosure this morning. She got ahead of Doyle's report. She knew we were coming. He turned. Someone warned her. And you are the only person outside my attorney and Mickey Doyle who knew the investigation was active and had any reason to... He stopped. Why? Carmine looked at his hands. Then he looked up. Because she didn't do anything wrong, he said. She built something, on her own, quietly, without hurting anyone. He paused. And you were going to use it to destroy her. The room was very still. She's my wife, Roman said. She was your wife, Carmine said. And you treated her like a prop for 9 years. And when she had the spine to leave, your first instinct was to find something to hit her with. He looked at Roman directly. I've done a lot of things for this family. I'll account for all of them, but not that. What Roman did in this 5 seconds that followed was something only Carmine in that room could have read accurately. A sequence of micro-expressions moving across a face that was usually locked down, each one lasting less than a second before the next replaced it. Fury. Then something under the fury that was more complicated. Then the specific quality of a man who has heard something true that he is not ready to process and is choosing, consciously, to bypass it in favor of something he can act on. You're done, Roman said. Carmine nodded slowly, as if he had expected this. As if perhaps he had been expecting it for some time. He stood, picked up his coat from the arm of the chair. I know, he said. He walked to the study door and paused there. For what it's worth, whatever you think you're winning here, you're not winning. He left. Roman stood at the window. His reflection in the glass was dim and incomplete, the lake ghost behind it. He stood there for 7 minutes by the clock on his desk, and then he picked up his phone and called Mickey Doyle. The meeting between Roman and Vivian was not the meeting Roman called for. He had called Sandra Osei's office at 11 a.m. demanding a sit-down with Vivian directly. Sandra had responded, through proper channels, that her client was not available for direct contact outside of formal legal proceedings. Roman had called 3 more times. The third call had been transferred back to Sandra's paralegal and had ended with Roman saying something that would technically qualify as actionable if anyone chose to pursue it. Vivian knew about all 3 calls. Sandra relayed them with the specific calm of a woman who had stopped being surprised by powerful men's reactions to the word no approximately 20 years ago. The actual meeting happened because Roman showed up. At 2:15 in the afternoon, Vivian walked out of Sandra's office building into the cold March air and found a black SUV parked directly in front of the entrance with Roman leaning against the passenger side. No driver visible. No security detail in immediate sight. Just Roman in a coat that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, with his hands in his pockets and his jaw set and his eyes on her from the moment she pushed through the door. She stopped. The street was active. A Tuesday afternoon in the Loop. Pedestrian traffic moving in both directions. A construction crew audible half a block south, the ordinary noise of a city that did not know or care what was about to happen on this particular square of sidewalk. She walked toward him. He said nothing until she was close enough that the conversation wouldn't carry to anyone passing. You filed first, he said. Yes. You knew Doyle had the Nevada entity. She didn't answer that. His jaw moved. James. She kept her face still. She would deal with the fact that he'd just confirmed James was his source later, in private, where the feeling of it wouldn't be visible to Roman. It doesn't matter how I knew, she said. What matters is the filing is on record. Your attorney is going to argue independent property. My attorney is going to argue marital asset concealment. He looked at her with something that was not quite anger, more focused than anger, the look of a man running scenarios. We're going to be in litigation for 18 months. Probably. Is that what you want? What I want, she said, is to be done. Then give me something. She looked at him. Excuse me? Give me something. He said it with less composure than he'd intended. She could hear it. The word came out with an edge that he hadn't fully controlled. Negotiate. Give me a number, a concession, something that lets us close this without... He stopped. I don't want to spend 18 months fighting you. You should have thought about that before you hired someone to investigate me. You hid assets. I built a business. During our marriage. While living in your house and wearing your dresses and smiling at your parties. The words came out level and precise. While being told in front of your associates that I wouldn't survive a week without you. While being treated like a decoration for 9 years. Yes, Roman. While all of that was happening, I also built a business. Something moved across his face that she hadn't expected. Not anger, not the cold calculation she was prepared for. Something less controlled and more human that was there for less than 2 seconds before he closed it down. How long? He said. How long were you planning to leave? 4 years. He absorbed that. She watched him absorb it. The specific quality of a man being told that something he believed was present was in fact already gone for longer than he can account for. And you stayed, he said. 4 years, knowing you were leaving. I stayed until I was ready. Ready? He almost said something else. She watched him stop it. His hands came out of his pockets and he turned away from her briefly, toward the traffic, and she saw the muscles in his jaw working. Then he turned back. The penthouse. Streeterville. You leased it a year ago. She said nothing. You were always going to walk out that door, he said. The night of the party. It didn't matter what I did. What you did, she said carefully, mattered a great deal. It always mattered. I would have preferred a different outcome. She held his eyes. You chose every night what you were going to be. You chose it for 9 years. I just finally stopped choosing to stay while you did it. He looked at her for a long time on that cold sidewalk with the city moving around them. She held the look without flinching because she was done flinching, had been done with it for years, and whatever happened in a courtroom for the next 18 months, it would not change that. My attorney, he said finally, is going to go after Claire Storm. She felt it, a tightening in her chest, involuntary, the physical response to a real threat. Claire Storm was the thing. The 4 years of early mornings and encrypted phones and building something real under Roman's roof while Roman slept. If Roman's attorneys successfully argued Claire Storm was a marital asset, the company's revenues and valuation would enter the proceedings, and the number would be significant. Let him, she said. The same 2 words she'd said to Carmine on the sidewalk 2 weeks ago. She said them now with less certainty than she'd had then, and she kept that off her face. Roman read something in her anyway. He was, whatever else he was, not an unobservant man. You're not as calm about that as you want me to think. Call your attorney, she said. He'll call mine. That's how this works now. She moved a step past him. His hand came out and closed around her arm. Not hard, not a grip that would leave a mark, but definite. I had investigators look at your financials, he said, low, close, the voice he used when he wanted something heard only by its target. I know the Nevada number. I don't know the Claire Storm number yet, but Doyle is still working. He paused. If you want this to end, give me a number. Today. We close it, we sign, we're done. If you make me go through discovery, I will find every dollar and I will fight for half of every dollar. And you will spend the next 2 years of your life in legal proceedings that will cost you as much as you'd have given me anyway. She looked at his hand on her arm. She looked up at him. Remove your hand, she said. He held for 1 second. 2. Then he let go. She stepped back, she straightened her coat, she looked at him one last time on that sidewalk, and what she felt was not hatred and was not love and was not even grief. It was something colder and cleaner than any of those. The feeling of looking at a chapter that is finished and seeing it accurately for the first time. "See you in court, Roman," she said. She walked back into the building. Her legs were steady. Her breathing was controlled. She made it to the elevator before her hands started shaking, and she pressed them flat against her thighs and kept them there until the doors opened and she stepped in and the doors closed behind her and she was alone. She stood in the elevator with her shaking hands pressed against her legs and breathed, once, all the way out. The number Doyle hadn't found yet. The Claire Storm valuation that Roman was now going to hunt with everything he had. 18 months of litigation, the prenuptial enforcement, the discovery process that could expose everything to scrutiny she had not designed it to withstand. It was the worst position she had been in since the night she walked out of that door. Every move had been correct and she was still, somehow, standing in an elevator shaking. The doors opened on Sandra's floor. She walked out. Sandra was in the hallway, already moving toward her, already reading her face. "He threatened discovery on Claire Storm," Vivian said. Sandra's expression settled into the particular focused calm of a woman who has been waiting for a problem to fully arrive so she can address it. "We knew this was possible. He means it. He's going to find the revenue numbers, and he's going to go after them. Then we need to talk about your options." Sandra put a hand briefly on her arm, the first physical contact between them in the years they had worked together, firm and brief and purposeful. "Come inside. We have work to do." Vivian followed her into the office. She sat down. She opened her laptop. And somewhere across the city, in the Loop office where Mickey Doyle was running search queries through financial databases and corporate registry systems, and building the picture of Claire Storm Advisory Group piece by piece, like a man assembling a weapon, his screen populated with a result that made him reach immediately for his phone to call Roman DeLuca. A result that neither Vivian nor Sandra nor Helena had anticipated, because it came not from any database Doyle had access to, but from a source none of them had known was... The source none of them had known was watching was James Hartwell, not the James who had photographed a document on a laptop screen at their mother's birthday dinner. Not the James who had been feeding Roman information for 8 months in exchange for debt relief and clean hands. A different James, Somas, or rather the same James running a different operation, one that had been active for longer than Vivian knew, and that was considerably more dangerous than photographing financial documents. Mickey Doyle had found it in a corporate registry cross-reference that linked James Hartwell's name to a consulting contract with Claire Storm Advisory Group dated 14 months ago. A legitimate contract, legitimately executed for a 3-month engagement in which James had provided market research services. Vivian had hired him during one of their better periods before the 14-month silence, believing the work would be good for him and the separation between his role and the company's ownership structure was sufficient insulation. She had been wrong about the insulation. The contract put James's name adjacent to Claire Storm's in a registered business document. It didn't prove ownership. It didn't prove anything except a professional relationship. But it gave Doyle a human being to pressure. And Mickey Doyle, Roman had always said, was extraordinarily good at pressuring human beings. Doyle called Roman at 4:17 in the afternoon. Roman called his attorney. His attorney called Sandra Osei's office at 4:49 with a motion to compel financial disclosure specifically referencing Claire Storm Advisory Group and citing the Hartwell-Claire Storm contract as the basis for believing undisclosed marital assets existed within the company's structure. Sandra called Vivian at 5:03. Vivian was still in Sandra's conference room. She had been there for 3 hours, working through the asset defense strategy with 2 of Sandra's associates, when Sandra appeared in the doorway with her phone in her hand and an expression that Vivian had not seen on Sandra's face before, which was the expression of a woman who has just received information that changes the terrain of the battle she's been fighting. Sandra told her about the contract. Vivian listened without moving. Then she said, "How long do we have?" "The motion was filed this afternoon. We have 72 hours to respond." "What are our options?" Sandra sat down across from her. She folded her hands on the table and looked at Vivian with the directness that Vivian had valued in her from their first meeting. "Technically, we can challenge the motion on the grounds that a consulting contract doesn't establish ownership. That argument has merit. It could buy us time. She paused. But Roman's attorney will use the discovery process to subpoena Claire Storm's financial records. And once those are in discovery, the 4-year revenue history becomes visible to the proceedings. And then Roman argues it's a marital asset. Yes. And with a sympathetic judge, that argument could succeed for a portion of it. Sandra looked at her hands briefly. The other option is to settle. On what terms? We go back to Roman's attorney with a number, a significant number, enough that Roman feels he's recovered something meaningful and enough that he agrees to a clean break with no further claims on Claire Storm or any other business entity. Vivian looked at the table, at the papers spread across it, 4 years of careful construction laid out in documents under conference room fluorescence. What number? She said. Sandra told her. Vivian was quiet for a moment. The number was large. It was survivable. Claire Storm's revenue trajectory meant she would recover it within 2 years. But it was large, and more than the dollar amount. It was the principle of it. Giving Roman DeLuca a significant portion of what she had built with 4 years of 4 a.m. mornings and encrypted phones and extraordinary, exhausting care. Let me think, she said. You have 72 hours. I need one. Sandra nodded and left her alone in the conference room with the city going dark outside the windows and the papers in front of her and the specific weight of a decision that did not have a clean answer. She thought about what Carmine had said on the sidewalk. Whatever you think you're winning here, you're not winning. She thought about what Sandra had said on the midnight call. Is the priority protecting the assets or ending the marriage clean? She thought about Roman on the sidewalk outside this building, his hand on her arm, his voice low and direct. See you in court. She thought about this elevator, her hand shaking against her thighs. 2 years of litigation, 2 years of Roman's attorneys inside Claire Storm's books, inside 4 years of her most careful work, finding the seams and the pressures and the places to push. 2 years of not being done. She picked up her phone and called Sandra back. Set up the meeting, she said. Tomorrow morning. I want Roman in the room. The meeting was in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a building on Michigan Avenue, with windows that looked north toward the lake and the sky above it, which was the particular pale gray of a Chicago March morning that has not yet decided what it intends to become. Roman arrived with Frank Castellano and a junior associate whose name Vivian didn't retain. Vivian arrived with Sandra and one of Sandra's partners, a tall woman named Grace Chen, who specialized in high-net-worth dissolution proceedings, and who had the quality of someone who had seen every version of this particular room and was not impressed by any of them. They sat across from each other at the conference table. Roman in a charcoal suit, his face arranged in the careful neutrality of a man who has decided this meeting is a transaction and is treating it accordingly. Vivian in a navy blazer she had bought with her own money 3 years ago, her hands flat on the table in front of her, her face doing the thing it had learned to do over 9 years of North Shore parties, present, composed, revealing precisely what she chose to reveal. The attorneys spoke first. Terms were laid out. Numbers were on the table within 12 minutes, which was faster than Vivian had expected, and told her something about how motivated Castellano was to close this. Roman had made a decision about what he wanted from this meeting, which was resolution, not victory. That was new. That was not the Roman she had prepared for. She watched him while the attorneys talked. He looked tired. Not the tired of a man who hadn't slept. She had seen that on Roman before, and it had a different quality. This was something deeper. The tired of a man who has been running at full speed for 30 years and has recently become aware, in some way he hasn't fully articulated to himself yet, that the thing he was running toward was not what he thought it was. She noticed, because she had always noticed things about Roman even when noticing was painful, that he was not performing. There was no room full of associates to impress. No audience requiring the character of Roman DeLuca, feared and untouchable. It was a conference room with attorneys and paperwork and the woman he had been married to for 9 years. And without the audience, he was simply a 53-year-old man in a good suit looking across a table with something in his eyes that she had not seen there before. The number came formally from Castellano at the 40-minute mark. It was lower than the figure Sandra had quoted her the night before. Meaningfully lower. Vivian looked at Sandra briefly. Sandra's expression did not change, but her eyes moved in a way that communicated, "This is worth taking seriously." "We'll need a few minutes," Sandra said. They stepped into the hallway. Grace Chen ran the numbers quickly on her tablet. Sandra said quietly, "This is a reasonable offer, Vivian. It's less than we estimated." "Why did they come down?" Vivian said. "I don't know. Castellano wouldn't have dropped without instruction from Roman." Vivian looked through the glass partition at the conference room. Roman was leaning back in his chair, not talking to Castellano, looking at the windows and the gray sky beyond them. "Give me 5 minutes," she said. She went back into the conference room alone. Sandra started to follow, and Vivian shook her head once, and Sandra stopped. She sat down across from Roman, not in her original seat, in the chair directly across from him, the closest position at the table. Castellano looked at her, and then at Roman, who looked at Castellano and tilted his head slightly toward the door. Castellano gathered his papers. He and the associate left. The door closed. She and Roman sat across from each other in a conference room 42 floors above Michigan Avenue, with the gray lake visible through the windows, and no audience, and no attorneys, and no performance required from either of them. "You dropped the number," she said. "Yes." "Why?" He looked at her directly. His hands were folded on the table, and his posture was the posture of a man who has decided to occupy less space than usual, which for Roman was a significant decision. "Because Castellano told me what the discovery process would actually look like," he said. 18 months. Depositions. Your company's records subpoenaed. Potentially your business relationships affected. He paused. "I didn't want to do that to you." She looked at him carefully. "Since when?" He almost smiled. It was a fractional thing, barely there. "Since I sat in my study for 2 days and read a private investigator's report about my wife's life, and understood that I had spent 9 years living next to someone I never actually tried to know." The room was very quiet. "That's a long time to realize something," she said. "Yes." "What do you want from telling me that?" "Nothing." He said it simply, without the weight of a man who is expecting something in return. "I'm not asking you to feel anything about it. I'm just—" He stopped. "I'm tired of performing, Vivian. I've been performing for 30 years. Even in here, I was still doing it until Castellano left." He unfolded his hands. "You walked out of my house with 2 suitcases, and you didn't look back, and I told myself you were making a mistake. And then Doyle came back with that report, and I sat in my study and I understood that you hadn't made a mistake at all. You'd done the thing I never thought you could do, because I never thought to look for it." He looked at his hands. "I treated you like furniture. You told me once, a long time ago, that you felt invisible in the marriage. I told you that you were being sensitive. I was wrong. She looked at him for a long time without speaking. "This doesn't change what I'm asking for in the settlement," she said. "I know. And it doesn't change what happened. I know that too. Then why—" "Because you deserved to hear it," he said. "From me, directly, not through attorneys." He met her eyes. "And because I have been the kind of man who doesn't say things like this, and I'm trying to understand what that's cost me." A pause. "It cost me you. I understand that. I'm not trying to recover it. I just—" He stopped again, seemed to find something. "I needed you to know that I finally understand what I lost, not as a possession, as a person." She sat with that. She sat with the specific feeling of hearing the things she had wanted to hear for years, arriving 9 years too late in a conference room with attorneys waiting in the hallway, which was the way important things often arrived, correctly, completely, at the wrong time and in the wrong place, and unable to change anything that mattered. "I never needed your promises, Roman," she said. Her voice was steady. "I needed your respect. I needed it when it would have made a difference." He nodded slowly. "I know. You can't give it to me retroactively." "No." She looked at the window, at the gray sky, at the city below it, where people were living their Tuesday morning lives without awareness of this particular room and what was ending inside it. "I'll take the number," she said, "and I want one additional term. Carmine Fazio." Roman looked at her. "Whatever you did to him after he told you the truth," she said, "undo it. He was loyal to you for 30 years, and he told you one honest thing and you cut him. Fix it." A long moment passed. Roman looked at the table and then at her, and something moved across his face that was recognition. The specific recognition of a man being shown what his own behavior looks like from outside. "All right," he said. She stood. She straightened her jacket. She looked at him one final time across the conference table. This man she had married at 29 and left at 38 and spent 4 years in the middle of building the life that made leaving possible. "I hope you find something worth respecting," she said. "In yourself. That's not sarcasm. I mean it." She went to the door. She opened it, and Sandra was in the hallway with Grace Chen and Castellano and the associate and all the machinery of formal legal dissolution waiting to resume. "We have an agreement," Vivian said. "Let's finish it." The papers were signed 11 days later, not in a conference room. In Sandra's office, quietly, with Sandra and one witness and the kind of procedural efficiency that made a 9-year marriage legally concluded in under 20 minutes. Vivian signed where she was indicated. She did not feel what she had expected to feel, which was a dramatic release of something long held. She felt instead a kind of thorough stillness, the stillness of a process completed, a system returning to neutral after a sustained period of stress. She drove herself home. She stopped for coffee at a place she liked in the West Loop, a small independent shop that had been there for 11 years and that she had been going to for 3 without Roman ever knowing it existed. She sat at the counter with her coffee and looked at the street outside and felt the particular quality of the air around her. The air of a Tuesday morning in late March that belonged to no one's expectations except her own. But the months that followed did not feel like triumph. She needed to be honest about that later, in the quieter accounting that happens after the battle is over and the adrenaline has cleared and you're left standing in the wreckage with the question of what to build next. There were weeks that were hard in ways she hadn't anticipated. The settlement payment had been significant, and watching it leave the account was a physical experience. Not devastating, she had the numbers to absorb it, but real in a way that pure strategy never quite prepared you for. She hired 2 new staff members at Clarestorm in April, and both of them required more management than she'd budgeted for. And she had a week in the middle of May where she worked 16-hour days and ate badly and slept 4 hours a night and felt, briefly, like the structure she had built was more fragile than she had believed. She got through it the way she had gotten through everything for the past 4 years, by working and by being honest with herself about what she was doing and what she was afraid of, and by not performing composure when she was alone. Helena had lunch with her in June at a restaurant in River North that they both liked. Helena ordered the salmon. Vivian ordered the same thing and then didn't eat much of it, and Helena noticed without commenting. "How is the company?" Helena said. "Good. Better than good, actually. The May client we brought on is tracking above projections. And you?" Vivian looked at her plate. "Functioning? That's a narrow word. It's an accurate one." She picked up her fork and put it down again. "I thought it would feel different. After. I thought it would feel like—" She stopped. "I don't know what I thought it would feel like." Helena looked at her with the unhurried attention she brought to everything. "You spent 4 years in preparation mode. It becomes its own state of being. When the thing you were preparing for is over, the state doesn't automatically resolve." That sounds clinical. It is clinical. It's also true. Helena reached for her water glass. "Give it time. Not everything has an immediate sensation of arrival." Vivian looked out the window at the June street, at the people moving through summer light, at the ordinary and continuous life of the city that had been here before her marriage and would be here long after the paperwork of it had been filed and forgotten. "I called James," she said. Helena was quiet. "Not to reconcile. Not yet. I called him to tell him I knew what he'd done in full, and that I understood the position he was in, and that I needed time." She paused. "He cried, which I expected, and I felt nothing when he cried, which I did not expect." "That will change," Helena said. "Or it won't. Either outcome is acceptable. He's in a program again, the 3rd one, I think. Do you believe it this time?" "I believe he's trying." She looked at her plate. "That used to be enough for me. I don't know if it still is." They finished lunch. They talked about the business for another 40 minutes, in the way they were most comfortable, specific, analytical, forward-looking. Helena had a referral from a former client that would be significant if it materialized. Vivian had been approached about a speaking engagement at a financial conference in September, which she was considering with the particular caution of someone who had spent 4 years in strategic invisibility and was still learning what deliberate visibility felt like. They parted on the sidewalk outside. Helena put on her sunglasses against the June afternoon light. "You did the hard thing," Helena said. "The hardest version of it. You built the thing and you fought for the thing and you paid the price of it." She looked at Vivian directly. "Now let yourself have it." She walked away. Vivian stood on the sidewalk for a moment and let the afternoon sit around her. Imet. Carmine Fazio called her on a Thursday in August. She almost didn't pick up. The number was new and she didn't recognize it, and after the past months she had developed a wariness about unrecognized numbers that she suspected would take years to fully dissolve. But she picked up. "It's Carmine," he said. "I know," she said, though she hadn't until he spoke. He told her that Roman had called him 2 weeks after the settlement was signed, that Roman had done the thing she had asked him to do, which was to undo what he'd done, and that he had done it with less ceremony and more directness than Carmine had expected. That Carmine was back in a role, a diminished one, but present. That he was 63 and tired and had one request. "What is it?" Vivian said. "Lunch," he said. "Sometime, if you're willing." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm willing," she said. They didn't schedule it on that call, but the door was open, which was enough. She moved the last of the things she'd been storing into the Streeterville penthouse on a Saturday in September, which by Chicago standards was an extraordinary day. Clear sky, mild air, the lake visible from her windows with a quality of light that made it look like something painted rather than something real. She had lived there for 6 months but had kept certain things in storage, certain pieces of her life before Roman, and before the plan, in a unit she rented on the north side. She'd been waiting, she understood now, to fully arrive, to commit to the space as hers rather than as a destination she'd been moving toward. She carried the boxes herself. She had offered to hire movers and then decided against it because she wanted to do it with her own hands, which was not a sentimental decision, but a practical one. The practice of inhabiting the life you've built by physically placing yourself inside it, piece by piece, without delegation. The last box contained things from her Northwestern years. A photograph, some books, a folded program from a lecture series she'd attended in her second year with a speaker who had said something she'd written on the inside cover and kept. She found it when she set the box down in the spare room that would become a reading space. She opened the program. The handwriting was hers at 22, neater than it was now, more careful, the handwriting of someone who was still working out what kind of person they were going to be. The note read, "The work is not the proof of what you're worth. The work is just the work. The worth was always there." She stood in the room with the program in her hands and the September light coming through the window and the city below her doing what cities do, which is continue. She had spent 4 years building in secret and 9 years performing composure and 38 years becoming the person who could do both of those things and walk out a door without looking back. She had paid for it, the settlement, the months that felt like suspended grief. The particular cost of building something under pressure and not being able to feel it fully until the pressure was gone. She had paid all of it. She set the program on the windowsill. She went back to get the last box. The penthouse door closed behind her with a quiet sound, and the room held everything she had brought into it, and the light moved across the floor the way light does when it has nowhere to be except where it is. And outside the window, Chicago opened endlessly in every direction. The lake, the towers, the ordinary and continuous human machinery of a city that did not care what she had survived and would not mourn what she had lost and offered itself, as cities do, entirely without condition. She did not need it to care. She had built something that was hers. She had protected it at the cost of things she had not wanted to lose. She had stood in hallways and conference rooms and parking lots and elevator cars and held herself steady through all of it. It was enough. Not everything. Not triumph, not the clean arrival she had once imagined, but enough. Real. Solid underfoot in a way that nothing borrowed or performed could ever be. She opened the last box. She began to put things where they belonged,